Hey everyone, we're back with another webinar from Apptricity. My name is Christian Garcia. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of our IoT Solutions for Retail Supply Chains webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about in-transit visibility. So basically, the sections in between the major parts of your supply chain, there's a lot of value there, and there's traditionally a lot of, there's a lack of visibility in between different delivery points, warehouses, storehouses, and then all the way to the storefront. So we're going to focus today's session on that space between and making sure that you can retain visibility of your important merchandise and inventory items as they move across the supply chain. So let's just go through the agenda real quick. So I will introduce myself, talk a little bit about Apptricity, our company, who we are and what we do. We'll discuss the purpose and the format of this webinar series, and then we'll just dive right in. We'll dive into really 4 sections: the overview, the solution focus, how to deploy a solution, and the benefits of a connected system. We will then reserve some time at the end for a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, again, if you've been on a webinar, you've heard this before. If you have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, we would ask that you hold off on asking those until the dedicated Q&A section. We will conduct that through chat. So if you have something that comes up in the middle of the session, write it down or type it out. And then when we go into that session, we'll address as many questions as we can. If for some reason we don't get to your question, feel free to shoot me an email. I have my email on one of the later slides in this deck, and I'd be happy to reach out to you and talk one-on-one about how we can help with your in-transit visibility. And after we do that, we'll close. And then as typical, these sessions will be on YouTube if you need to go revisit them. If you want a personal copy, we can also send that to you as well. So that will be our agenda for today. So introductions. My name is Christian Garcia. I'm a product manager in charge of our supply chain management solutions here at Apptricity. I've been with the company for over 10 years, depending on how you would qualify that time. But in my time here, I've worked on testing the solutions, I've worked on demoing and deploying, and then I've worked on helping to develop the solutions that we're talking about today. So very knowledgeable about Apptricity, been with the company for a long time, and I've seen firsthand how these solutions can help businesses, specifically managing different areas of their supply chain. Apptricity, who's Apptricity? We've been around for over 20 years, and we're a provider of IoT-enabled cloud-hosted solutions that utilize cutting-edge IoT device technology. And we develop some of our own IoT devices. We also integrate with other tags such as RFID or Bluetooth tags. We build a few of our own in-house. We build our own edge devices, our scanners that we'll be talking about a little bit more in detail. We do build those out in-house, but we also are a software company first. So all of our solutions, we have a development team here who works on them. And we have found in our time in the business that it's just easier to go to one solutions provider for both things, as opposed to having to go shop multiple components of a solution between multiple vendors. And so we introduced the IoT hardware side not too long ago because we saw a need for going to a one-stop shop for both hardware and software. So that's why we do both of those things. Like I said, we've been in the business for over 20 years. We work with large organizations like Verizon, Komatsu, Brinks, and then we have a government side of the business. We've been working with the U.S. Army for over 10 years. I think, I'm trying to remember the exact number, probably about 18 years now. And then we've also worked with different deployments of the U.S. Air Force as well. So that's a little bit about who we are, a little bit about who I am. Let's talk a little bit about this webinar series. So this is part 2. Part 1 was recorded about a week ago. And we're doing all of these recordings at the same time. Now, one thing to note, the 3rd session will actually be on Monday. So we've been doing these sessions. I think the first session was on a Thursday. Obviously, today's session's on a Wednesday. The next session will be next Monday. So this will be a little bit sooner. There'll be a little bit less time in between sessions. So make sure you check your calendars for that. But really what we're trying to present in this webinar series is that complete supply chain visibility is not only achievable, but it can be done with an automated, low-maintenance solution that combines cloud-hosted software and IoT-connected devices. what we're trying to accomplish with the solution is eliminating blind spots in key areas of the supply chain. We talked a little bit about some of the pain points at the manufacturing and warehouse level in part one. In part three, we're going to be talking about some of the pain points at the storefront level. And today we're going to be talking about, again, those middle grounds between those different points, the in-transit side of your supply chain. And we're going to really be addressing three different retail business models. The first being companies that manufacture and sell merchandise at self-managed channels. Basically, companies, they build their own product and then they sell at their own stores that they manage. The second type of company would be one that manufactures and sells their merchandise across both self-managed channels and authorized retail partners. So these would be, the example I used last time was Nike. Right? They operate their own stores, but they also sell at other retail shops like places like Dick's Sporting Goods, or if you're here in Texas, Academy Sports and Outdoors is another big one. So different sporting goods stores. And the third type of company that we're addressing is companies that do not manufacture their own merchandise, but they sell product from multiple retail partners. So again, you could probably use the Academy Sports and Outdoors or Dick's Sporting Goods model. They, as a company, bring in retail from multiple different manufacturers, and they sell at their storefront. So there's the three different types of businesses that we're addressing with this supply chain solution webinar series that we're going to be doing. So really the goal that we're trying to accomplish with this series is to discuss the viability of IoT-enabled solutions at three key points. We talked in the previous session about manufacturing in the warehouse, how you can utilize IoT devices and cloud-hosted software to connect and provide visibility, solve some major pain points that you face in the manufacturing and warehouse side. Today's session is going to be specifically focused on in-transit visibility. How do we retain that same level of visibility that we can build out at the manufacturing and warehouse level? How do we retain that as things start to move between different sections of the supply chain? And then the third session, which, as I mentioned, will go live next Monday, is at the storefront, because the storefront, the work's not done once it gets to the store. Once it's there, it's almost more painful if you lose it when you get it to that final spot right before you sell it. So there's different pain points that we'll be addressing in that third session that will go live next Monday, October 10th. If you look at the diagram here, this is really how we built out and where our solutions kind of take place in the supply chain. Depending on the type of business that you manage, you may do your own manufacturing and you may be able to deploy solutions in that environment. If you don't do your own manufacturing, at some point you're receiving product and receiving merchandise into your warehouse or storehouse or distribution center, and you can start managing it at that level. And then it gets to the storefront, and then it ultimately ends up in the hands of the consumer. And then we look at the in-between space, the part two, highlighting that in-between space that represents the travel between different points of emphasis or different stopping points in your supply chain. So that's really what we're here to do, is talk about IoT, Internet of Things technology, and how it can be utilized to primarily promote visibility, because that's really what we're in the business of, is promoting visibility so that you can reduce things like shrinkage and theft and things of that nature. So without any further ado, let's just dive right in. In-transit visibility, just an overview. We're talking about the in-between area connecting major points of the supply chain. Whether you own and operate your own shipping fleet, or if you rely on third parties, 3PL types of companies, retaining visibility for in-transit merchandise is imperative. This is a key area where things disappear, for whatever reason, or we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go deeper into the webinar. Things may have strict environmental requirements in order to maintain the efficacy of the product. If you think of things, this isn't necessarily, this is technically considered retail, but if you think of things like groceries, they have to be kept at a certain temperature or a certain humidity level. Those are requirements, environmental requirements, to maintain the efficacy of the product. And so whether you consider grocery retail or not, I will leave that discussion up to you, but really the common pain points that this industry or this section of the supply chain faces is shrinkage, things getting lost, things getting stolen, as it's being shipped from one location to the next. We talked a little bit about product expiration, things that might spoil or expire or go bad during the actual transporting of the goods itself. Talk a little bit about incomplete shipments due to understocking. We mentioned this kind of concept in part one, but if you have problems at the top end of the supply chain, they will continue to snowball and grow as it goes down the supply chain, ultimately until you get to the storefront level and you realize a mistake made at the top end can result in drastic understocking at the bottom end, or an inconsistency between what you think you have and what you actually have. And so when we talk about incomplete shipments due to understocking, we're really talking about kind of the tail end of the manufacturing and warehouse side. This is the part where you're loading up a shipping vehicle to deliver to a storefront, or there may be another intermediary step between your warehouse and a distribution center and a storefront. So depending on your model, there's a lot of opportunity there in the shipping section for mistakes to compound. And so if I'm expecting 50 pallets of a specific product at my store in a week's time, but I only get 48 of those pallets stocked, well, I'm not going to find out about that until it actually gets delivered. And so how can we prevent those understocking things from happening? How can we alert people that, hey, you're supposed to have 50 of this item on the vehicle, but I'm only counting 45? How do we stop them from leaving and starting their route and then realizing, oh, darn, I didn't completely, stock my vehicle out? So those are the problems that we're really looking to address with an IoT solution. Again, we talked a little bit about IoT technology, and to give it the one sentence definition, it's very simple. It's just things that are connected to the internet. You have devices that you put on whatever you want to connect to the internet, and it's a transfer of data. In this case, we're talking about location data, or if you have multiple tags across multiple pallets, then you're tracking things like quantity. We'll talk a little bit about sensor technology, which we'll introduce in this episode as well. These are all things that are connected to the Internet of Things for the purpose of sharing data. So that's what we mean when we talk about IoT technology. So solution focus. We're going to talk a little bit about what solutions do we use to solve the pain points that we mentioned. And the foremost of which being the connected service vehicle. We mentioned this briefly in part one about how you can use the same technology for solutions like inventory tracking and indoor positioning. You can use that same technology and that same hardware to create a connected service vehicle. And basically what a connected service vehicle does is you would outfit your vehicles with an iConnect controller, which is an edge device or a fixed reader, and you would put antennas, whether, if you're tagging things with Bluetooth, you'd put Bluetooth antennas. If you're tagging things with RFID, you'd put RFID antennas. You situate them around the vehicle itself to promote, a full breadth of coverage, of scan coverage. And once items get scanned inside that vehicle, you have a vehicle set up in the asset management or inventory management solution, whatever you choose to use. You have a vehicle set up, and as things get scanned in that vehicle, you are comparing what is in that vehicle with what we call a loadout profile. So this is basically saying, this is what is expected on this vehicle, and we're now comparing what is scanned to what is expected. So to go back to the previous example I used, if I'm expecting 50 pallets, then I'm expecting 50 tags. And if I only scan 40, then I need to be alerted. I need to know, hey, this has not been properly stocked. And so the connected service vehicle with the iConnect controller scanning the tags. And again, if you were part of part one, we talked a little bit about the tagging process and how, at what point in the supply chain do you tag the goods that you're looking to track? And it all depends on when it gets manufactured. If you manufacture your own goods, you can tag it whenever you want. If you're receiving manufactured goods from a different retail partner, then you would be tagging them as you receive them, as you now have custody over them. And so using those same tags and using the same type of iConnect controller that we're using to track quantity levels in the warehouse, we're now putting that same controller inside of a vehicle. And now we're tracking everything inside the vehicle. So oftentimes we call the connected service vehicle a mobile warehouse, because that's really what it is. We're tracking everything that goes in and out, and we're comparing it to what should be in. And we're taking that information and really we're auditing to make sure that it matches. And so the way that you can view that from the driver's perspective, now if we go into the user persona of the person actually driving and operating this shipping vehicle, we have a field services mobile application. And this basically is a tablet application that shows drivers everything that's on their vehicle, everything that's tagged, everything that's scanned. And it basically compares that to what we call a par value or an expected value. I'm expecting 10 of this item and 5 of this item. I'm scanning 10 of this item, but only 4 of this item. I'm going to send an alert. Hey, something's not properly stocked here. Don't leave until you're properly stocked. And that's what the tablet application does, is it gives the driver that at a glance view of everything that's on the vehicle, and it's updating as that driver stops, and as he starts up the vehicle, he's getting a fresh feed of what's on his vehicle as they're moving throughout their day. And then we'll talk a little bit more about sensor technology. So this is specifically related to the types of tags that you decide to use. So we have this here as a solution focus because really sensors, they play a part in InTransit visibility, but really they can be used really at any part of the supply chain, because what you're trying to do is track important data about your product. We talked about things like temperature or light exposure or shock. Those are some common things that people want to track about their shipments. And so when you tag items with tags that have these types of sensors, you're now gathering that data, and you can track and manage and make sure that the product that you're shipping is being handled correctly, that the environment that shipment is in is being handled correctly, and that it's optimal for maximizing product lifespan. So we'll talk about sensor technology a little bit more as we progress through the slideshow. So how do we deploy a solution? We kind of talked about this a little bit already. The first step, and you might recognize this from part 1 if you were with us in part 1, the first step is to install the prerequisite infrastructure. And we're talking again about fixed readers, / iConnect controllers, if you want to use Aptricity vernacular, with internet connectivity. So you may remember part 1, we talked about iControllers that can use Wi-Fi, they can use Ethernet, they can use LTE or cellular. If you start to think about the context of a shipping vehicle, we're really only seeing LTE and cellular because you can't really hook it into an Ethernet connection. Obviously, that would require something static. Depending on the type of vehicle you have, I know certain vehicles can be outfitted with Wi-Fi. So there's a potential to connect a controller to the Wi-Fi of the vehicle itself. But typically what we've seen is putting a SIM chip into these iConnect controllers. Now, these are exactly like the SIM chips that you use in your personal smart device. It can be on a plan like Verizon or AT&T or Sprint T-Mobile. It can be whatever you want. But you're essentially setting that controller up with a data plan, because the controller itself is scanning tags, and then it is sending that information to the cloud-hosted solution via a cellular. I have LTE in here. 5G is also being used. You can also have tags with 3G or SIM chips with 3G fallback. So really the main talking point here is that it's a cellular connection. And as those scans are taking place, that information is being relayed up to the solution that's being hosted in the cloud. And so when we start talking about equipping vehicles with these controllers, we're outfitting those controllers with RFID or Bluetooth antennas, depending on the type of tags that you use. And then we can connect it to vehicle power. That's how the thing is being powered. Now, we've learned the hard way, if you connect it directly to the battery, it will drain your battery. So what we've done is we've connected it to the ignition. So it'll only power up when the ignition is on. You can also get, depending on the type of vehicle, if you use those cigarette lighter charging stations, you can get one of those adapters that turns that into a typical power outlet, and you can plug it in via that way. And so basically when the vehicle powers up, that's when the controller is now active and it has power and it's scanning and doing its job. So that's typically what we've done is we've outfit vehicles in a variety of different ways. Whether it's a huge 18-wheeler or one of those box type of vans, or what anything in between. We've done things like pickup trucks or service trucks, anything. There's an optimal configuration for all of those, and that's how we basically light up the vehicle, so to speak. The other thing that I actually didn't mention here in this slide is that the controllers can also have a GPS antenna built into them. So not only are you tracking the inventory, the merchandise inside the vehicle, now you're getting GPS coordinates for the vehicle itself. And now you can track that vehicle as it's moving, along its route. And anything that gets scanned inside the vehicle, the GPS coordinates of the product inside are the same as the vehicle. So now you're saying, okay, I see the vehicle, I see what's inside. And then if I want to go to the map and search for a particular shipment or product, I can see that because the product itself is taking on the GPS coordinates of the scanner. So that's how we basically can visualize these items on a map. And so point number two, as we can assume at this point that merchandise has been tagged. If it hasn't been tagged, I would highly suggest you go back to point one or to part one to discover how you can tag, where you can tag, at what point does it make the most sense. But at this part, we're really assuming that merchandise is tagged, and as your warehouse workers or your distribution center workers are stocking vehicles, you power up the vehicle, and the controller is going to start scanning. It's going to start saying, okay, I'm seeing these tags. I know that these tags are associated with this product. And this is where we start to get into ensuring that the onboard inventory counts match what is supposed to be there. So that could be, set through a loadout profile. You could have a shipment that, it could be a piece of paper that you say, hey, I know that I need to have this much stuff. And now you can compare that to what's actually being scanned. And if the quantity doesn't match, you'll get an alert on the field services mobile application saying that this item is understocked, and you need to go make sure that you have enough of this item before you start your route. Essentially, one of the things that we run into with this connected service vehicle, and it depends on the layout of the vehicle itself, is interference with metal. For those of you who might have been a part of our very first webinar here at Aptricity, where we talked about the different tagging technologies, the pros and cons, the different things to know about that. Metal can be your friend and your foe when it comes to RFID and to a lesser sense Bluetooth, but it will reflect signal. So that can be great if you have a nice wide open, think of an 18-wheeler, shipping container that's pretty wide open. If you start to introduce things like metal racks, that can be a bit of an issue when dealing with interference. And so what we tend to do when we consult with businesses who use a solution is we go through an optimal setup of tag placement on the item and an optimal setup of antennas inside the vehicle to ensure that you're getting maximum scan coverage. And so a lot of times what will happen is if you stocked 50 of this item, but the system's only getting 48, if you shuffle some things around just to make sure that you're promoting maximum visibility of scans, that thing will correct itself and light up and say that you're good to go. But you also can, the alerts are there for just to notify you. So if you know that you have everything that you need, and the scans are coming in and it's saying that you have less, but you're willing to move forward beyond that. Alerting is just to alert you that something may be wrong. It's not a hard stop. You can push past it if you need to. So we also talk about shipments with environmental requirements. We start integrating sensor tags, and we start setting up alerts for sensor tags. Cold chain is a big component of this. If I have to keep, something like produce in between, I'm just throwing these degree measurements out there. I don't actually know what they are specifically, but if I have to keep produce between, 55 degrees Fahrenheit and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, well, obviously you want to know if it goes below or above. Most likely it's going to go above. But if that does happen, you want to alert the driver so that they can go back and make sure, maybe the AC is not working, or, maybe the refrigerator that it's in has broken down, or maybe it's overpowered and it's too cold inside that refrigerator. And so this alerts the driver so they can go take action to basically save that product, because, certain products, they can live outside that, optimal temperature range for a certain amount of minutes. Other products might go bad the second that they fall outside of that. And so that's really where sensor tags can come into play. Same thing with things like light sensitivity. Certain products may not be able to be exposed to light for a certain amount of time without spoiling or without going bad. So that's where sensor tags themselves can really play a huge role. And we see them more on the in-transit side, because as a vehicle's moving, obviously you can't get in there and go, address issues. If it's in a warehouse and you get an alert, you can go address it immediately. As the vehicle's moving, you can't do that. So that's really why we see sensors on the shipping side, because the conditions are less controllable, if you will. And so basically, as the shipping vehicle transports and delivers these shipments, vehicle and onboard merchandise is tracked in up to real time. And I say up to real time because real-time tracking is certainly achievable. It just tends to cost more. And some people want to have that, step by step every second, or, every 3 seconds, every 5 seconds. They want that information. From the mapping side, you can view that as the vehicle is moving along. We have what's called push mapping. And so as the vehicle is moving, it's kind of like, think about when you rent an Uber at the airport and you see the vehicle coming closer to you. You don't have to continually pull down on your phone to refresh the location of the vehicle. The vehicle's moving. That's called push mapping. Basically, it's pushing updates to you as opposed to you having to go pull or refresh your phone to get those updates. So that's really where push mapping comes into play. But as the vehicle is moving, like we mentioned, if you have a GPS antenna associated with a controller, you are now getting GPS updates at the same time as you're getting, quantity updates and location movement. So let's dive into the benefits of a connected system. I think because this is really what we're here for, is we want to know, why should I do this? What am I going to get from doing this? And the first point, and we've hammered on this quite a bit, but to ensure that shipments are properly stocked. It does you no good if you're expecting to receive 50 and you only receive 40. Now you've created yourself a shortage, right? Especially these things can be incredibly accentuated if you're dealing with items that are hot items, that they fly off the shelves. If I'm requesting 100 of a specific item because I know I'm going to sell 100 and I only get 80 or 90, you're missing out. You're missing out on potential profits. This happened. This happens with things like iPhones. I remember the early days of iPhone pre-ordering. If you went to the store, you had to get to the store early because they didn't have enough to serve everybody. And even if you put in a pre-order, you couldn't be promised that you'd be getting it. And I don't know if that was due to supply chain shortages or potentially understocking of a particular product, but I know that can lead to things like understocking and missed opportunities. And so by ensuring that your shipments are properly stocked, you eliminate those problems. Before the vehicle takes off, and a lot of times, these vehicles are driving, hundreds of miles in a day. So once they leave, there's really no turning back. You can't be like, oh, wait, you missed these things. Oh, that's too bad. I'm already 200 miles away from the distribution center. I'm not going to turn around, because perhaps the only thing worse than being understocked is being late. And so I'd rather be late and deliver less or I'd rather be on time and deliver less than be late and deliver the proper stocking. Those are the types of issues that supply chain managers have to deal with. And so by getting that information up front before you send that driver on his merry way, you can eliminate understocking. And that's a huge, huge, huge component that we see with a lot of the businesses that we work with that deploy this specific solution, is that eliminating that on the front end really helps them understand and eliminate potential roadblocks down the road. Talk about loss prevention. We mentioned shipments that, as they go between stops, product just goes missing. A driver stops at a rest stop, meets up with some of his buddies, and he knows what he's carrying, and decides to share some of that with some of his buddies. Having these things tagged and having these things tracked gives you that visibility to know, wait a minute, why am I only, I know I shipped 50, but now I only see 40. Yeah, I can tell my driver to do the scan, maybe all the tags weren't read. Oh, I'm getting 40 again. Well, where did those 10 go? I know that you're not at the distribution center. I know that you're not at the storefront yet. So where did those 10 items go? Gives you that visibility so that you can approach it proactively instead of reactively. And again, you have this tablet application, Field Services Mobile, which gives you those alerts. It can give you those push notifications like the ones that you get on your smartphone every day, things like text messages or emails or things of that nature. You're getting push notifications to know that, hey, something's wrong here. Something's, we're missing something. We need to take a look into this. Talked about reducing product expiration, integrating sensor tags to ensure optimal environmental, procedure for maximizing the lifespan of product. Again, this goes into things that are expirable, if that's even a word. Having those tags, receiving that data, understanding when conditions are suboptimal for maintaining the maximum product lifespan. Those things, again, they allow you to be proactive. And that's really, if you look at an IoT-enabled solution as a whole, and really where the market is going with IoT, it's enabling businesses to be proactive to prevent failure events from happening, as opposed to reacting to them once they've happened. And there's still value in reacting and understanding how you can improve your process to keep those things from happening. But if I can prevent the failure event from happening before it happens, that's really where you're saving your money. And so that's what IoT technology does. And down the line, that's how sensor tags really help. And then kind of this fourth point, this is this is something that a lot of shipping companies already utilize, but enforcing delivery schedules. Because the eye controller is in the vehicle and it has a GPS antenna, you know where that vehicle's at. And therefore, you know where they should be at given points in their shipping route. So if they're running behind, you can reach out to the driver and say, hey, I see that you're only at this point. You need to be at this point by now. Maybe you should stop taking so many breaks. You can track things like idle time. If the vehicle is not moving, a particular distance over the course of a certain period of time. A lot of times what we've seen is when you start lighting these vehicles up, you start getting a little bit of a preview into driver behavior. Why are they staying 2 hours at this specific rest stop? Or, why are they at the bar for an hour and instead of being on the road? Things like that are insights that you get when you start to light up those vehicles. And so you can identify the current location, you can identify movement history, things of that nature by lighting up a vehicle with the GPS antenna associated with the iConnect controller. And that pretty much wraps up in-transit visibility. These are all things that you get by implementing an IoT-connected solution with a cloud-hosted software solution on the back end. And so with that in mind, we will reserve some time now for a Q&A session. Like I mentioned before, if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I will address them as they come up. If, again, for some reason, if I don't get to your question, I will reach out to you, or you can reach out to me personally, and we can set up a discussion. So we will now transition into our Q&A session. Okay, question from Annie. Are the tags reusable? RFID tags typically, when the product is, it reaches its final state, because they're so cheap and because they're so small, you'll typically dispose of RFID tags. You won't reuse them. When it comes to Bluetooth, absolutely you can reuse those because those have battery powered, or those are battery powered. And so as soon as those tags are done and delivered to their final location, you can take it off, probably want to replace the battery to, ensure that it has maximal battery life, and then put it on another product. And so as long as if we go back to part one and we talk about that process of associating the specific tag identifier with the specific product, as long as you terminate that connection when it reaches its final destination, which is easy to do, you can then reuse that tag on a different product. So yes, tags are reusable in the Bluetooth sense. Technically, RFID tags are reusable. They don't go bad. It's just that they're so cheap and they are so small, and they're the size of a barcode. You typically don't care to take them off once they reach their final destination. Okay, question from Scott. Do you have clear tags so they can't be seen on an item that will be sold in my store? Are they discrete? Yes. So with Bluetooth, it's a little bit more difficult because just the actual chipset itself is, it requires a little bit more than just an RFID tag. RFID tags can be incredibly discrete. They look just like a barcode. They can look just like a barcode, I should say. Bluetooth is a little bit more difficult, but we've been very creative in finding ways to put them in areas that keep them discrete, that make them look like they're either part of the product or just something that you wouldn't think to track. I know a lot of retailers are starting to actually bake those into the product themselves. I've seen, I think North Face on a lot of their jackets, they actually bake in RFID tags as part of the actual tag itself, specifically on their jackets. Not in Texas, it doesn't get too cold, but when I used to live in Colorado, everybody had a North Face jacket, and if you look at the product tag, they have a little RFID tag. I know it's hard to get scale when I'm pointing towards the camera, but a couple inches long. So yes, you can find discrete tags. And one thing that I mentioned in the previous webinar that I'll mention again, we are not beholden as a company to any specific tag manufacturer. So if you find something out in the market that you're like, yeah, this is what I want to use, and it's RFID or Bluetooth, odds are we can integrate with it, and we can integrate with it as part of your solution. Question from Ben. We already have barcodes on most of our inventory. Do I have to get rid of these to get an in-transit tracking solution? No. Oftentimes, when we come in to help businesses out, we don't get rid of the barcodes. We just supplement them with another tag. So if you have a barcode solution that's in place and you have familiarity with it with your employee base, and they know how to use it, a lot of times we'll just add a tag in addition to the barcode. Additionally, we can print off barcodes onto RFID tags. We can also print barcodes and QR codes onto Bluetooth tags. So you don't have to replace your barcode solution. And a lot of times you can actually match the barcode with the RFID tag number. It's a little more difficult to do that with the MAC address of the Bluetooth tag. But no, you do not have to replace your barcode solution. Question from Mario. Is this platform agnostic for deployment or on any architecture or ERP? Yes, it is. We are same thing that we say about tags. We are not beholden to any tag manufacturer. We are also not beholden to any deployment architecture. We have standard built-in interfaces into many of the major ERP solutions. If you want a full list of those, you can actually go to our website and find that. But really, where we tend to come in as a business is not to replace the ERP solution. And this is a point that we've mentioned in previous webinars as well, is we're really providing a system of operation. And what a system of operation does is it tracks and manages the day-to-day workflows. Frequently, where we come in is we get that data and then we feed the existing ERP solution that's in place, the system of record. And so I always like to say that your ability to project and to resource plan is only as valuable as the accuracy of your day-to-day data. And so that's really where we've come in as a business and really been able to maximize the value of an ERP solution by giving quality day-to-day information from our system of operation. Good questions, everybody. Okay, well, if any questions do come up that you may have, feel free to reach out to me. In closing, like I mentioned, our next webinar is on Monday, October 10th at 10:30 a.m. Central. We've done the 10:30 a.m. across the first two sections, so we'll continue that. But the next webinar will go live next Monday. If you have questions, like I mentioned, that I didn't get to, or if you think of something after the fact, you can reach out to me, cgarcia@apptricity.com. Be happy to reach out to you, start a conversation, and go through any questions that you may have. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the session, today's recording will be up on YouTube if you want to revisit it. If you want to request a personal copy, we can do that as well. I want to thank you guys for joining us today. As I mentioned, next week will be the final part of this webinar series where we're talking about IoT solutions for retail supply chains. If you have any questions, reach out to me. We would encourage you to visit our website if you want to learn more information. Check out the podcast. That's another good resource for long-form content where we go deep into these types of topics. We also go into more broad topics about just the technology itself, different solutions, and where they fit best in the supply chain. So that's all I have for today. We thank you guys for joining us, and we hope to see you next Monday for the third part and the final part of this webinar series. Thank you, everybody.